Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Good evening, godless sodomites.
What are you doing?
I'm bringing the truth, John. We're in Hollywood, the belly of the beast.
You can't just read the prompter?
I'm reading the prompter in here. You can read that pablum.
Award show banter is not pablum. Reality television celebrates the human condition. By illuminating what's extraordinary in the ordinary person.
It warps the minds of our children and weakens the resolve of our allies.
The results are often dramatic and always unexpected. We're here to honor achievement in that category.
By giving you a golden idol to worship. Kneel before your God, Babylon!
Can you feel it? That sense of impending darkness that permeates the landscape of our current zeitgeist, infiltrating and dominating today's pop culture. But has it always been this way? Are the entertainers of today simply echoing a message that has always been there? A message emanating from baneful and secretive sources, with the sole purpose of subverting every facet of our society and leading the masses down the wide path of destruction through the glorifying and worshiping of the same false idols of antiquity. In this episode, we explore further the origins of this idol worship, the spiritual, biblical, and historical ramifications for such wicked behavior, and the insertion of evil into our entertainment, social justice, and religious institutions, as well as the ancient origins of how it all began and what it all means for humanity's future. Is life imitating art? And if so, where does it all lead? Is today's pop culture foreshadowing a picture of a battle that is yet to take place, a battle that was foretold long ago?
the night falls, darkness comes, darkness increases. But the Erev Rav, to simplify it, is a group of people. And a group of people that, according to what we're going to read now, what the Zohar said 2,000 years ago, they're going to control the world prior to the coming of Mashiach. And there's only one individual that's going to have to come and destroy the Erev Rav, and that's Mashiach. He's going to have a job and a half.
And who's to lead us?
You gave that.
Yeah.
Where could I bring you except to Egypt?
Where there is death,
No, where there's food.
Pharaoh would kill us all.
Not if a god of Egypt went before us. You could make one for us, Aaron.
No. Aaron knows the art of the temple. I will not. But we can't remain. Stay
He
here.
will not. He would rather see our flesh rot in the wilderness. You will make a god for us.
A god of gold. A golden calf.
Korah shall be the high priest.
Bring baskets, buckets, shawls, anything you have. Break off your earrings. Here, your bracelets, your necklaces. We will make us of a golden calf.
Throughout history, there have been many people who have claimed to be Moshiach, or the Messiah, but few would have the lasting impact of Sabbatai Tzvi, who had adopted much of his Kabbalistic teachings from Isaac Luria before him. These studies of Kabbalistic mysticism have gone on to find their way into modern Kabbalah, Sabbateism, Hasidism, Freemasonry, and even into Orthodox Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, aided by the arrival of Jacob Frank and Frankism in the 1700s. The effects from these teachings still remain, and the adherents of these views have been involved in nearly every major modern conflict to this day. But the story goes back even further, back to the second book of the Pentateuch, the book of Exodus, arguably one of the most important books of the Bible, as it helps to define the identity of Israel. The book of Exodus tells of the Egyptian oppression of Jacob's growing descendants and their deliverance from slavery by God through Moses, who leads them across the Red Sea to Mount Sinai, where they enter a new covenant with the Lord. These events would define Israel as a new nation with a special relationship with God through the Torah, which was given by God to Moses. The elements of this story are essential to the later teachings of Jesus and New Testament scripture, and feature episodes of rebellion, repentance, and divine mercy. A mixed multitude, or Erev Rav in Hebrew, also left, and would change the face of redemption and the course of all Jewish history. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, and even very much cattle. Throughout 2 millennia of biblical interpretation, the Erev Rav have been portrayed both positively and negatively, and modern scholars still debate its meaning and number of people who mixed with the Israelites, some saying as many as 3,600,000, which would have by far outnumbered the 600,000 men mentioned in Exodus 12, verse 37. However, in the Samaritan Pentateuch, the term is written as one word, and if this is the correct translation, then there may be no comment as to the size of this group. The term Erev Rav would not be mentioned again in the Tanakh, but another term is used later on in the book of Numbers, chapter 11, verse 4. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? This is also a debated term, but the Aramaic translation of Asapsuf is Arav Ravin, so it is possible that the terms are similar, meaning mixed or gathered mass. According to American Hebrew professor at the University of California, Berkeley, Robert Alter, the words may be where we get the terms rabble or riffraff. The first instance of the root term asaph is used in Numbers chapter 10, verse 25, referring to the tribe of Dan, serving as the rear guard. Their task was to gather up lost objects or people and return them to the group. Dan was known as weak of faith and a group prone to idol worship, as is suggested in Genesis chapter 49, verse 16 through 18, as a serpent by the way, an adder on the path that biteth the horse's heels. The tribe of Dan was the first tribe of Israel to participate in pagan idolatry, slow to repent of their sins, and come out of the end-time idolatry of Roman Catholicism. Some of the ancient Danites chose not to follow Moses into the land of Canaan, and around 1500 BC, they would appear on the island of Sardana, otherwise known as the island of Sardinia, in the Mediterranean Sea. This tribe was a seafaring tribe, as described in the book of Judges, chapter 5, verse 17. Dan would receive their inheritance in the north, near the cities of Tyre and Sidon, which were known home ports of the Phoenicians, and would later continue migrating to the northwest of Europe, into the British Isles. These people were often known as Sarmatia, likely deriving from the term Samaria, and then later on Skoloti, which are now known as the Scots of today. They also settled in Ireland and Denmark, which implies the area of Dan. The tribe of Dan is missing from the list of tribes in Revelation chapter 7, and not part of the 144,000 Jewish witnesses in the tribulation period. But as we will see later on, Dan will appear to play a major factor in the end times. Although the Erev would not be mentioned in the Tanakh after the Torah, the Zohar does make mention of them, categorizing them into 5 groups: the Nephilim, the fallen ones, giants, described in Genesis chapter 6 as the offspring of sexual union between the sons of God and daughters of men, also described as heroes of old. The Nephilim and their evil unnatural ways may be one of the main reasons for the flood of Noah's time, although the Nephilim were on the earth after the flood as well, also described in the book of Genesis. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. The Gibborim, often mistaken with the Nephilim. Gibborim refers to the mighty men of King David, suggesting that they were mortal. The Anakim, referenced in Joshua chapter 15 verse 13, as being related to Anak, the son of Arba, the greatest man among the Anakim. The Anakim were believed to be descended from the Nephilim. The 12 spies of Israel were reported as such. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. In the book of Joshua, chapter 11, verse 22, we see that the Anakim are defeated, leaving none left in the land of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some remain. It is suspected that Goliath, the Philistine giant slain by David, was from Gath, and might be a descendant of Anakim. The Rephaim. The Rephaim refers to the spirits of the departed dead who dwell in Sheol, or home of the wicked dead. The word Rephaim means terrible ones, and are also described as giants and mighty men. They appear in Genesis chapter 14 verse 5 in battle with King Chedorlaomer. Og, king of Bashan, was believed to have been one of the last of the Rephaim. The Amalekites. The Hebrew name means I am king. The Amalekites are first mentioned in Exodus chapter 17 verse 8, fighting with Israel in Rephidim as they came out of Egypt, looting and attacking the rear ranks while they were weak. Moses notes in Deuteronomy that the Amalekites did not fear God, a factor that God would not forget. The Israelites would meet the Amalekites in battle again when Moses commands Joshua to lead his men against the mighty, a task that appeared insurmountable. Joshua defeated them militarily, while Moses raised his arms towards heaven with staff in hand, as Aaron and Hur supported his arms during the lengthy battle. God would later instruct King Saul to destroy them in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 2 to 3. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. Despite winning the battle, Saul did not follow through with God's instructions, choosing to spare their king, Agag, and the best of their livestock. God would send Samuel to remind Saul of his misdeed, and to kill King Agag himself. Because of this, some Amalekites escaped. 5 centuries later, in the story of Esther, we see the appearance of a character, Haman, who plotted against the Jews in Persia during the reign of King Xerxes. Haman was known as the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, descending from the Amalekite king killed by Samuel. These stories throughout biblical text are likely there to illustrate the deception and trickery employed by the Amalekites then and still today. The Amalekites descend from the Edomites, who, like the Amalekites, are in constant struggle with God and his people. Edomites come from Esau, son of Isaac and twin brother of Jacob, who later became known as Israel. At the age of 15, Esau became known as Edom, Hebrew for red, likely due to the reddish complexion of his skin and hair, and symbolized his penchant for violence. The book of Jasher even states that Esau, and not the character of Shem, had killed King Nimrod, founder of Babylon and Assyria, in order to steal a cloak that had been passed down from Adam. This might suggest why Esau was weary when returning from hunting, and why Jacob, seeing Esau as evil, convinced him to sell his birthright for a pot of red lentils.
And Nimrod and 2 of his men that were with him came to the place where they were, when Esau started suddenly from his lurking place, and drew his sword, and hastened and ran to Nimrod, and cut off his head.
This account is heavily disputed, as the time of Nimrod was far earlier and improbable for Esau to have done this, coupled with the fact that the veracity of the book of Jasher in general is in dispute. Esau would marry at age 40 to Adah the Hittite and Aholibamah the Hivite. This displeased his parents because they worshipped pagan deities. Jacob would go on to steal Esau's blessings, leading to a lasting rivalry that would appear to continue to the end of their lives, when Esau would lay claim to Jacob's final burial spot in the cave of Machpelah in Canaan. Amidst this dispute, it is said that Esau would be slain by Hushim, son of Dan. Esau's offspring would also lead to 12 tribes, many which are now scattered through the Muslim world.
They have said, "Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites, of Moab, and the Hagarenes, Jabal, and Ammon, and Amalek, the Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asser also is joined with them. They have holpen the children of Lot. Selah."
One of these groups was Magdiel, which is explained in various midrashim as Rome. This is why much Jewish literature refers to the Roman Empire as the Kingdom of Edom. The stories of Esau and brother Jacob, or Edom and Israel, show a bitter hatred for the other that appears to last to this day. This is even alluded to in Genesis chapter 25, verse 23.
And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger.
Both Esau and Jacob would become very wealthy, so much so that they would eventually separate.
And Esau took his wives, and his sons, and his daughters, and all the persons of his house, and his cattle, and all his beasts, and all his substance which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob. For their riches were more than they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom.
This area is what we now know as Petra in Jordan, the chosen land for the descendants of Esau, the Edomites. Here, the Lord would eventually exact destruction on the Edomites, as we see reference throughout biblical text. This sibling rivalry not only exists today, but will play a major role in the coming end times.
Let's go for a little bit of a detailed answer on who these Erev Rav are. So, It says in Shemot, in chapter 7, verse 2, that the people that converted, the Erev Rav, they all spoke one language. What does that mean, they all spoke one language? The reason is they spoke a specific language, and that was the language of sorcery. The people that converted were actually the magicians. The magicians are the ones that converted to the Jewish. They were part of the Erev Rav. And we know, we spoke about this, that Bilam's children were part of the Erev Rav.
The magicians being referred to are Jonas and Yambrus, sons of mystic Balaam, and advisors to the Pharaoh. Upon the realization that Moses was backed by the power of God, they accepted circumcision and converted to join the Israelites, like many other Erev Rav. This conversion is similar to the conversion we saw with the Frankists, Sabbateans, and Donme, discussed in episode 1. Their father, Balaam, was a wicked prophet whose story begins in the book of Numbers, chapter 22, when Balak, king of Moab, summons the renowned Balaam to place a curse upon Israel in order to defeat the approaching Israelites in battle. God, referenced as Elohim, appears multiple times to Balaam and forbids him to curse the blessed Israel. However, Balaam is eventually granted permission to meet Balak on the condition that he speak only what Elohim commands, eventually resulting in the mystic blessing and not cursing Israel, to the dismay of King Balak. Along the way to meet the king, there is a curious story of Balaam riding a donkey, which lays down in the path and even speaks to Balaam, refusing to go any further, despite Balaam's striking of the donkey, after the donkey witnesses an angel in its path, convincing Balaam to bless and not curse the Israelites. This scene is depicted in an 1837 political cartoon of President Andrew Jackson, suggesting him as a modern-day Balaam, a depiction that would later contribute to the emerging symbol of a donkey for the Democrat Party. According to the American archaeologist William Foxwell Albright, Balaam, who was son of Beor, may very well be or is at least connected to Balak, also son of Beor, who became king of Edom, as per Genesis chapter 36, verses 31 through 32. His execution is reported in Numbers chapter 31, verse 8, as punishment for his role in an incident in Numbers chapter 25, when Balaam encourages the Moabite women to seduce the Israelite men and sacrifice to their gods, namely Baal of Peor, which means Lord or Master or Ruler, and was a common name for the gods of the Canaanites, Peor referring to an opening, possibly the nearby mountaintop.
They joined themselves also unto Baal Peor, and ate the sacrifices of the dead.
Although Albright could be correct in assuming that Balaam or Bilam and Bela, both suggested in biblical text as son of Beor, was an Edomite, he was summoned by Moabite king Balak from Syrian Mesopotamia. Albright argues that Balaam was an Edomite sage, and that the reference Aram in Numbers 23 may simply be a corruption of Edom and not Aramea, which now covers modern-day Syria, Turkey, and parts of Lebanon and Iraq. The behavior at Baal Peor was so detestable that God not only punished Balaam, but many of the Israelites, Midianites, and Moabites, resulting in a plague that killed 24,000 and served as a reminder throughout biblical text. Baal Peor was associated with the disregard for any and all sexual restraints, involving extreme sexual acts and sacrifice. The Hebrew word Peor comes from the root word opening, meaning open, gap, wide, or hole. Many scholars suggest Baal of Peor can be translated as Lord of the Gap or Lord of the Holes. Some Talmudic traditions associate this god with exposure or excrement and encourages the literal use of all holes for sexual pleasure. These rituals promoted a matriarchal dominance as opposed to the traditional Hebrew structure of patriarchal authority, establishing the feminine, often in a dominatrix-type role, and effeminating the male. Practices such as this involved defecation, anal and oral sex, and even involved children and animals. Baal Peor, or Baal Fagor, is one of the 7 princes of hell in demonology, and is depicted in the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, seated on a toilet. The origin comes from Moabite lineage, having been conceived in sexual sin. This is told in the book of Genesis, chapter 19, with the character of Lot, who fled from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, only to be intoxicated by his daughters so that they could have sexual intercourse with him.
And Lot went up out of Zoar, and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar. And he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us, after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. Thus were born the daughters of Lot, with child by their father. And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab. The same is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger she also bare a son, and called his name Ben-ammi. The same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day.
So God tells Moses, don't, they're no good. Don't let them come in. So Moses started arguing. He says, no, but listen. He says, they want to do good. They saw all your wonders. They saw the 10 plagues. He says, now they see the true faith. Let's bring them in. And Moses went and brought them in. And then we'll see, this is, by the way, the Zohar says this. And this is what this is where the problem started happening.
This was far from the only incident in the Bible where we see bizarre ritual and idol worship, but the events at Baal Peor would remain in the memory of God's people and would be referenced in other texts.
Your eyes have seen what the Lord did because of Baal Peor. For all the men that followed Baal Peor, the Lord thy God hath destroyed them from among you. Is the iniquity of Peor too little for us, from which we are not cleansed until this day, although there was a plague in the congregation of the Lord? I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fathers as the first ripe in the fig tree at her first time. But they went to Baal Peor, and separated themselves unto that shame, and their abominations were according as they loved. They joined themselves also unto Baal Peor, and ate the sacrifices of the dead. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000.
And finally, in Revelations chapter 2, verses 14 through 16, we see the prohibition of marrying Moabites' deeper meaning.
But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. So hast thou also them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which thing I hate. Repent, or else I will come unto thee quickly, and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth.
Perhaps the most well-known story of this golden calf worship is in the book of Exodus, chapters 31 and 32, when the Jewish people, only 40 days after receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai from Moses, create an idol after assuming that Moses, who had departed up the mountain, had died or disappeared.
And the people sinned a great sin, for they had made them a god of gold. And they bore him upon their shoulders, and rejoiced, saying, This be our God, O Israel.
Are you mourners of Moses afraid to face the new God of gold?
They were as children who had lost their faith. They were perverse and crooked, and rebellious against God. They did eat the bread of wickedness, and drank the wine of violence. And they did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And the people cried, The graven image hath brought us joy. And they worshipped the golden calf, and sacrificed unto it.
Here is your sacrifice!
Although this idolatry was considered a grave sin, a common misconception is that the Israelites were looking for a new God, but the real sin was in the way they were looking to represent Yahweh, by using familiar traditions of the past held in the area from where they came, namely statues of gold and earthly images, which was still forbidden by Yahweh.
Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth.
Despite their intentions, Yahweh had commanded that there be no idols made, even in his image, and the use of gold was to be saved for the tabernacle, in which Yahweh had designed himself. but the intent of the people is made clear in Exodus chapter 32, verse 5.
And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord."
This is expressed once again later on in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 3.
And you shall overthrow their altars, and break their pillars, and burn their groves with fire. And you shall hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the names of them out of that place.
But their way was a way that was very common, not only in Egypt, but Canaan and throughout the land. Among many gods of Egypt, the Apis bull was one of the most prominent representations. Others included Basis and Nevis, and sacred cows such as Isis and Hathor, symbols of the sun, and Osiris. In Apis, the supreme god Ptah could be found, until it would die when it would become Osiris, the grand architect and arguably a primary inspiration for Freemasonry. In her book Daedalus and the Origin of Greek Art, archaeologist Sarah Morris contends that there appears to be a connection to the gods Ptah of Egypt, Cathar Wahasis of Phoenicia, and Hephaistos of Greece, all gods of the arts and crafts. In the city of Ugarit, northern Syria, and major trade center between Egypt, Asia Minor, and Mesopotamia, a tablet praises Cathar Wahasis, saying his seat is at Memphis, his throne is at Kaptor, Memphis being the home of Ptah's cult. Ptah was known as the Lord of Memphis. Ptah is seen as the master craftsman and is associated with Osiris and Saturn and linked to a trinity of Ptah, Sekor or Sokar, Osiris. Some believe this trinity is expressed by the Egyptian Scythian pagans in Ireland through the three-leaf clover. The Irish name Patrick originates from the Druid Ptah Rek. Ptah can sometimes be depicted as a green man, similar to Dionysus, Bacchus, Osiris, Kos, or Serapis, representing rebirth and renewal. The country of Egypt derives its name from Ptah, being Ha-Kap-Ptah, referring to both the temple and the Egyptian kingdom, roughly translating to the temple or house of Ptah. The story of Ptah goes back even further than the first dynasty, to around 3100 BCE, where Ptah appears in written record as a local deity and protector of Memphis. As Upper and Lower Egypt unified, Ptah's importance also grew. He is considered part of the Memphis triad, along with Sekhmet and Nefertem. Ptah was believed to have created everything from out of the void and made the physical universe, as well as many of the original gods, including Num, often depicted as a man with the head of a ram, who created much of the physical world, including animals, crafted on a potter's wheel. Ptah is known as the patron deity of architects, painters, builders, and sculptors, which explains one of the links to Freemasonry. He created Atum, also known as the Great He-She, and solar creator god of Egypt, originally represented as a serpent, and later as a father of the pharaohs. Ptah presided over a great ceremony known as the Opening of the Mouth, which restored life to the deceased. Another name for Ptah is Master of Ceremonies. According to the Shavaka stone records, Ptah helped settle the fight between Horus and Set by making them lords of both Upper and Lower Egypt. The importance of the story to Horus, Osiris, and Set to Freemasonry is analogous to the story of the killing of master architect Hiram Abiff, and is discussed in episode 1. Ptah would later adopt the sage, architect, astrologer, and physician Imhotep, who came out of the 3rd dynasty, built the step pyramid of Saqqara, and would later be worshipped as the god of medicine, identified later by the Greek god of medicine Asclepius. Ptah is expressed as PTH, reversed as Hotep, HTP. Ptah is usually depicted as a mummified man with unbound arms, holding a staff which incorporates the Ankh, representing life, the Waz, representing power, and the Jed, representing stability, and is standing on a plinth known as a Ma'at, representing order and justice, and is shaped as a tool used by stonemasons to form a straight edge. Other times he is shown as Ptah Sokar Osiris, wearing a sun disk with a ram's horn, along with a copy of spells from the Book of the Dead. In his hands, the Jed embodies an elevated level of consciousness. The day of Heb-Sed celebrates the pharaoh's jubilee, in particular the erection of the Jed, the vertebral column of civilization and man raised up by 4 floors of the pillar, the beginning of the Great Awakening.
A lot of people come up here and they thank Jesus for this award. I want you to know that no one had less to do with this award than Jesus. He didn't help me a bit. If it was up to him, Caesar Milan would be up here with that damn dog. So all I can say is, suck it, Jesus. This award is my God now.
You are, of course, nominated this evening. How does it feel being nominated tonight?
Always an incredible honor. The other names of the gentlemen are all gods.
The Oscar, otherwise known as the Academy Award, given each year to reward achievement in the film industry, bears an uncanny resemblance to that of the god Ptah, Sokar, Osiris, and an eerily similar name to that of Sokar or Ausar, which is another name for Osiris, god of Freemasonry, and central figure of Egyptian ruling dynasties. The belief is that this figure will once rise again and rule the world. Although the date of the annual Academy Awards fluctuates, many of the ceremonies have taken place near or on the 4th month near the 26th day, similar to the annual festival of Sokar or Koyuk, celebrating the rebirth of Osiris, which were held in the city of Memphis, where the triad of Ptah, Sokar, Osiris originates. The Oscars are now held at the Kodak Theater, the approximate location of a former Masonic lodge, under its first master, Gilbert F. Stevenson, who lived nearby on a 5-acre lemon ranch. Stevenson sold this ranch to a lodge brother, developer Charles E. Toberman, who is often referred to as the father of Hollywood and master of the lodge in 1914. It was Toberman who persuaded Sid Grauman to unironically create the Egyptian Theater, now owned by Netflix, as well as the Chinese Theater and the Max Factor building. The architect for this project was John C. Austin, who would later work on the Griffith Observatory, City Hall, the Fremont Hotel, NBC Radio City Studios, and the Shrine Auditorium, also a Masonic headquarters for the Shriners, and the Al-Malaika Temple. Over the years, the Shrine Auditorium would play host to numerous Hollywood award shows, such as the American Music Awards, BET Awards, the Grammys, MTV and VH1 Music Awards, NAACP Awards, People's Choice Awards, the Screen Actors Guild Awards, Soul Train Awards, the Emmys, Country Music Awards, Miss Universe, Teen Choice, and of course, the Oscars. Toberman was also involved in the developing of the El Capitan Theater, owned by the Walt Disney Company and adjacent to the Hollywood Masonic Temple, also owned by Disney's Buena Vista, and current host to the Jimmy Kimmel Live show. This building is famously rumored to have a secret tunnel leading to the Chinese Theater. Like the Festival of Sokar, the Oscars feature the awarding of highly revered statuettes made with an approved prototype, overseen by, like Ptah, a highly esteemed master of ceremonies. Recipients of this award, like the soul of the pharaohs, ascend to become stars, to live in eternity amongst Orion. By the year 1492, much of the Jewish community had been banished from Spain. Many moved to the Americas, where they eventually found their way into the foundations of American banking, money lending, utilities, government, media, and various solid occupations. Others went east, some finding their way to Turkey, where the Donme, or Sabbatean crypto Jews, would arise from a solid Freemasonic foundation. Outwardly, they were Muslim, but the Jewish Kabbalistic practices would remain a well-kept secret, hence the propensity to work through secret societies. By the 16th century, many Jews migrated to the holy city of Tzfat in northern Israel, a city referenced by Roman Jewish historian Josephus. It is celebrated in the Talmud as being one of 5 elevated locations in which ceremonial fires are lit to announce the arrival of the new moon. Tzfat is thought to be founded by a son of Noah after the Great Flood, and is referenced in Judges chapter 1, verse 17. The land likely would have belonged to the tribe of Naphtali. Tzfat has existed through Christian crusades, the Sunni Muslim rule of Saladin and his Ayyubid dynasty, who had become the first sultan of Egypt and Syria, and the first to be recognized as custodian of the 2 holy mosques of Mecca and Medina. But Tzfat would also become an important spot for Judaism, particularly Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah, starting with the arrival of Rabbi Joseph Karo and his historic Bet Yosef, an extensive commentary on a wide range of rabbinic literature, including Talmudic and Geonic or Babylonian Talmudic ideas. A massive undertaking after the Jews had just recently been expelled, and with the arrival of the printing press, printing their oral traditions could put their rituals at risk. By the 15th century, many Jews in the region of Tzfat were mainly divided into 2 larger groups, one being the Maimonides, based on the teachings of Moshe ben Maimon, or Moses Maimonides, a Sephardic Jew whose family had also fled from Spain and later to Egypt, where he would be raised. Renowned as an expert in astronomy and medicine, and later published the Mishneh Torah, his attempt to provide written statements of the oral law. Egyptian Sultan Saladin appointed Maimonides to royal personal physician, as he was regarded as one of the foremost authorities on Egyptian Jewry, which would also subject him to major controversy. Maimonides was a mystic, versed in Kabbalah, arguably based on ancient Egyptian Kabbalah. From Rabbi Moshe Green's foreword to 6 treatises attributed to Maimonides.
Maimonides was apparently an adherent of the position that Kabbalah was, in fact, a hidden and secret branch of Torah, and its study must not be conveyed by any other means than from the mouth of the master to the ear of an understanding recipient. It is no wonder, then, that Maimonides avoided any reference to Kabbalah in his writings.
The writings of Maimonides appear to reference teaching of ancient Zoharic traditions, although he died in 1204, and the Zohar would not appear until 1290. Greens continues with his assertion.
A closer study of the subject, however, reveals quite the opposite to be true. Maimonides was indeed steeped in Kabbalah. The seeming absence of references to Kabbalah in his writings is very much in keeping with the accepted practice of that period, and is also consonant with his personal literary style.
The controversies of Maimonides' teachings come down to 2 central ideas. Number 1, Ma'ash Bereshit argues that there is no separation between the upper world described in Genesis and the lower, upon humanity. Humans are deemed default part of God, as God embodies all creation. These ideas reference Kabbalah, and the emphasis is put upon seeking answers about the time before God created the universe. Number 2, Maaseh Merkava. Maaseh Merkava argues that the prophet Ezekiel was incorrect about his vision of the Lord, which led to his admonishment of the Jewish people about their breaking of God's covenant. Once again, this vision involves the idolatrous behavior and worship of false idols. In chapter 8 of the book of Ezekiel, God reveals to Ezekiel in a vision the depraved and idolatrous behavior being performed at the temple, and precisely what he plans to do about it.
He said furthermore unto me, Son of man, seest thou what they do? Even the great abominations that the house of Israel committeth here, that I should go far off from my sanctuary? But turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations. And he brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, behold, a hole in the wall. Then he said unto me, Son of man, dig it now in the wall. And when I had digged in the wall, behold a door. And he said unto me, Go in, and behold the wicked abominations that they do here. So I went in, and saw, and behold every form of creeping things, and abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel, portrayed upon the wall round about. And there stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel, and in the midst of them stood Isaiah, the son of Shaphan, with every man his censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. Then said he unto me, Son of man, hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark? Every man in the chambers of his imagery, for they say, The Lord seeth us not. The Lord hath forsaken the earth. He said also unto me, Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was towards the north, and behold, there sat women, weeping for Tammuz. Then said he unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house. And behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces towards the east. And they worshipped the sun toward the east. Then he said unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Is it a light thing to the house of Judah, that they commit the abominations which they commit? Hear, for they have filled the land with violence, and have returned to provoke me to anger. And lo, they put the branch to their nose. Therefore will I also deal in fury. Mine eyes shall not spare, neither will I have pity. And though they cry in mine ears with a loud voice, yet will I not hear them.
Maaseh Merkabah, meaning work of the chariot, is referring to Ezekiel's vision of God's chariot, accompanied by curious heavenly beings such as the cherubim, seraphim, and ophanim. Maimonides contends that it's not a vision of God's creation, but speaks to aspirations of higher technology, science, and philosophy, all possible achievements, all achievements of man. Maimonides did not invent Merkabah mysticism, but he did promote it. Merkabah can be traced back to anywhere from 100 BC to the year 1000 of the Common Era, much of it composed from 200 to 700 Common Era. The speculation of how Maaseh Merkabah was passed on is varied, but the doctrines of Merkabah were largely a secret, and not to be discussed in public. It was reserved for elite scholars, to be trusted to only those who possess the 5 qualities described in Isaiah chapter 3, verse 3.
The captain of 50, and the honorable man, and the counselor, and the cunning artificer, and the eloquent orator.
Merkabah is a form of pre-Kabbalah Jewish mysticism that promotes the sublime journey to God and draws the heavenly powers to earth. Mer meaning light, Ka meaning spirit, and Ba meaning body. When the Merkabah is within your being, you are no longer restrained, by the third dimension. This is represented by a two-star tetrahedron, one pointing upward to the heavens, and the other down to earth. In Merkaban mysticism, the character of Enoch, who later, according to some, would become the angel Metatron, features prominently in tradition. This tale is similar to the lore of Idris in Islamic tradition. Metatron is the guardian of perfect form, sacred geometry. The cube of Metatron is birthed from the tree of life. The cube of Metatron, a 2D figure created from 13 circles, all similar to each other. The cube acts as a channel of energy from source to potential, a hive mind state of intellect, communicating and merging with Metatron.
The earliest records of Jews having mystical experiences date from the 2nd century, the very period when most rabbis were organizing against mysticism, and when the early Christian church was organizing against the Gnostics. Mystics practiced what is called Merkava, or chariot mysticism, a term that comes from Ezekiel's vision of the chariot of God. The prophet Ezekiel is the prototype of the Jewish mystic. Imagine you as Ezekiel feeling the tremendous presence of all 7 levels of the heavens. For centuries, Jewish mystics have tried to reproduce Ezekiel's experience. The Merkava mystics occupy themselves with all the details of the upper world, which extends throughout the 7 palaces in the heaven of Aravot, the uppermost of the 7 heavens, with the angelic hosts which fill the palaces, with the rivers of fire which flow down in front of the chariot, and with the bridges which cross them. The vision of Ezekiel brings to mind the vision of the I Am that I Am, the Son of God, and the individual who ascends the planes of being to attain to those levels. The rabbis opposed the practice of Merkava mysticism on the grounds that it was dangerous. Jewish law contained warnings against trying to replicate Ezekiel's experience. The public reading of Ezekiel's vision was banned, except on the festival of Shavuot. In fact, Sholem wrote, the rabbis sought to conceal the book of Ezekiel by withdrawing it from general circulation or from the biblical canon. Nevertheless, Jewish mystics practiced Merkava mysticism, usually in secret, for about 1,000 years. Why did the rabbis fear? They feared because the individual would make direct contact with the living God without them. It is the fear of every hierarchy, of every world religion. The flame surrounds a leaping fire, around him burning, glowing coals. This is the experience of a Jewish mystic. Someone like you, someone like me.
The retelling of Ezekiel's vision is essential to understanding Merkaba. This and the teachings of Maimonides, arguably one of Judaism's most prolific rabbis, still remain today. In the 1980s, the prominent sect of Chabad Lubavitch began visiting the Maimonides synagogue in Cairo, Egypt, to mark the completion of their study of Mishneh Torah. The work of Maimonides will be argued for years to come and will still play a major role in Judaism today. The city of Sfat would play host to a second major movement known as the Tosafot, who had a rather ambiguous and evolving approach to the Talmud. A movement in its earlier inception had led to 24 wagon loads of Talmudic scrolls, nearly 10,000 volumes of manuscripts burned by the Catholic Church after the Disputation of Paris, otherwise known as the Trial of the Talmud, at the court of King Louis IX in France. Scholar Chaim Maccabee would suggest that the purpose of the Paris Disputation was to separate the Jews' belief in the Talmud and coerce a return to Old Testament Judaism, which he argued was a coercion to the conversion into Christianity. The French Church believed that the Jews had perverted Christianity by rejecting the Old Testament law of Moses in favor of a blasphemous, increased reliance on Talmudic text. Much of this trial centered around two crucial figures based on the work of Nicholas Donin, who was a convert to Christianity and pressed 35 charges against the Talmud to Pope Gregory IX, allegedly using blasphemous passages regarding Jesus, Mary, and Christianity itself. Pope Gregory was ruler of the Papal States, issuer of the Decretales, promoting medieval canonical law as the law, and formed 6 legal texts, much of which sets a foundation for modern Western law. Pope Gregory also instituted the Episcopal and later Papal Inquisitions. Both were regarding heresy amongst two groups, the Cathars and the Waldenesians. The Waldenesians shared similar views to Calvinists. In 1975, the original church merged with the Methodist Evangelical Church and formed the Waldenesian Church. The other group were the Cathars, which was a Gnostic movement that emphasized dualism, an idea that one God is good, the other is evil. The Paris Disputation would be a pivotal moment in the evolution of separation from Orthodox and Reformed Judaism, a departure from the written Torah in exchange for Babylonian mysticism, Zohar, and Talmudic Kabbalah, much of it shared in secretive oral tradition, from the mouth of the master to the ear of an understanding recipient. The oral tradition goes all the way back to Moses and the Torah, and the Erev Rav amongst the Israelites. The idea is that Moses received the commandments and shared with Joshua, who shared with the elders, or Zechariah. These elders would pass knowledge on to the Nevi'im, or prophets, who would then advise an assembly of 120 sages known as Anshe Knesset Hagdalah. Unlike written law at the time, oral history could easily be subject to misinformation, where only the ear of an understanding recipient might understand. Secret societies would prove to be an efficient host to these occultic behaviors, enabling the scholars to mingle with the influential while implementing their ritual, which might otherwise be deemed unacceptable. It was the French that coined the phrase Kabbalah, which comes from the Latin Kabbalah, referring to Kabbalah. The Kabbalists have a long-standing reputation for secretive and selective societies. What wisdom could they hold that would have to be guarded so secretly? The Disputation of Paris would bring about a public discourse of this divide. The following are just some of the doctrines that were in dispute.
For murder, whether of a Cuthian, by a Cuthian, or of an Israelite, by a Cuthian, punishment is incurred, but of a Cuthian by an Israelite, there is no death penalty. It applies to the withholding of a laborer's wage. One Cuthian from another, or a Cuthian from an Israelite is forbidden, but an Israelite from a Cuthian is permitted. A heathen is executed on the ruling of one judge, on the testimony of one witness, without a formal warning, on the evidence of a man, but not of a woman, even if he be a relation.
Areas in the Talmud also claim that Jesus and his disciples used black magic, which Jesus learned in Egypt, and that Jesus was sexually immoral. It has even worse to say about his treatment.
Peter Schaeffer is head of the Judaic Studies at Princeton University. In his book, Jesus and the Talmud, he documents and analyzes every time Jesus is mentioned in the pages of the Talmud.
Keep in mind that the Talmud was written hundreds of years after Christ lived. And so it has references about Jesus in it, and they are hateful, blasphemous references.
According to the Talmud, Jesus was the product of adultery, the bastard son of Mary and a Roman soldier named Pantera. He spent his early life in Egypt, where he learned black magic, idolatry, and sorcery.
Jesus was born to a whore. Mary was a whore. She had sexual relations with many men. The father was a Roman centurion.
The Talmud further blasphemes the Lord Jesus by calling him a fool and comparing him with Old Testament villains such as Balaam, Ahithophel, Doeg, and Gehazi.
Does the Talmud talk about the Jews killing Jesus? Or
Vaguely, but Maimonides believes that the Jews killed him, that the Jews executed him because of certain of his doctrines and so forth.
Do you believe that the Jews killed Jesus?
It's possible the Jews did kill Jesus.
Right.
So let's say they did. All right, maybe he deserved to die. Maybe he was a troublemaker. Let's assume we did. So we killed somebody.
One particular Talmudic tale is that of Roman sage Onkelos, presumed nephew of Roman Emperor Titus, who would conquer Jerusalem in 70 AD. The process of Onkelos' conversion to Judaism is enacted with his conversations with the dead, starting with Titus and ending with Jesus, all advising him that the Jews would fare best in the next world. But before he gets to Jesus, we see the appearance of a familiar character, that of the revered mystic Balaam. From the Mishnah, the Gittin states that all three were raised through necromancy.
He then went and raised by incantations the sinners of Israel. He asked them, "Who is in repute in the other world?" They replied, "Israel." "What about joining them?" They replied, "Seek their welfare, seek not their harm. Whoever touches them touches the apple of his eye." He said, "What is your punishment?" They replied, "With boiling hot excrement, since a master has said, 'Whoever mocks at the word of the sages is punished with boiling hot excrement.'" Hast thou heard how old Balaam was? It is not actually stated, but since it is written, "Bloody and deceitful men shall not live out half their days," he was 33 or 34 years old. Thou hast said correctly. I personally have seen Balaam's chronicle, in which it is stated, "Balaam the lame was 30 years old when Phineas the robber killed him." In the case of all those mentioned as having no portion in the future world, you should not take the biblical passages dealing with them to expound them to their discredit, excepting in the case of the wicked Balaam, whatever you find written about him. Lecture upon it to his disadvantage.
The three sinners of Israel are the three that Onkelos speaks to through seance: Titus, Balaam, and Jesus. These three would also represent how many Talmudic writers felt about them by their punishment. Balaam was not just a powerful mystic, but a revered prophet taken from nearly 1,000 miles away to curse Israel. Yet we also know from biblical texts that Balaam could speak to God, which makes his anti-hero status so intriguing. Widely regarded as powerful as Moses, Balaam knew very well the power of God, yet resorted to a wicked existence nonetheless. Even though his blessing upon Israel would be profound, so would his involvement in the corruption and debauchery that led to the death of thousands at Baal Peor. This fact is not forgotten in the Talmud, seeing Balaam as one of the most wicked toward Israel. The biblical book of Joshua states that Balaam would die at the hands of the Israelites. The Talmud mentions his slaying by someone simply known as Phineas the robber, which could possibly be a veiled reference to Pontius Pilate, governor of Judea under Emperor Tiberius, and man who presided over the trial of Jesus and later ordered his crucifixion. While many of the Talmud's secrets are unknown, we do see a few allusions to Jesus apart from his direct mention of this account. Mentions of Jesus do not use Yeshua, which means salvation, rather Yeshu, which means may his name and memory be blotted out. Just like Jesus or Yeshua, Yeshu was condemned by the Sanhedrin, hanged on the eve of Passover, about to be stoned for sorcery and apostasy, and was relatively influential with disciples. There is another tale of Ben Stada, which also seems to chronicle an alternate tale to the life of Jesus.
But did not Ben Stada bring forth witchcraft from Egypt by means of scratches in the forms of charms upon his flesh? Was he then the son of Stada? Surely he was the son of Pandira. The husband was Stada. The paramour was Pandira. But the husband was Paphos ben Judah. His mother was Stada. But his mother was Miriam, the hairdresser. It is as we say in Pumbeditha, this one has been unfaithful to her husband.
Balaam's tale is not simply about just a greedy magician, but a wayward prophet. Despite having a recognized God-given ability and a relationship with God, extended God's grace one too many times and was destroyed because of it. For his desire to curse Israel, he will forever be seen as wicked. Jesus too will be seen as an enticer, brutally punished for leading others astray and mocking the sages, the Pharisees, Sadducees, and members of the Sanhedrin. Talmud, in part, is the tale of Jesus, told through the lens of those who would kill Christ, a tale only told in secret oral tradition, rich with coded meaning, gematria, and symbolism. Like Christianity and any other major religion, views are varied and many, but this sentiment toward Christ still remains. From a current Chabad Lubavitch website. The Bible gave warning about a dangerous false prophet who would arise to test our faith in God. In Deuteronomy 13, God describes this false prophet as a member of the Jewish people who would tell true prophecies and would have the power of miracles. God himself would give this false prophet the power to perform miracles and reveal prophecy. But the false prophet would try to seduce the people away from God's law and towards strange gods unknown to Judaism. In Deuteronomy 17, this false prophet is also described as someone who would rebel against the authority of the judges of the Jewish people and who should be put to death for his rebelliousness. Who were the judges? The highest court in Israel was the Sanhedrin, which was established by Moses and which lasted more than 15 centuries. The members of the Sanhedrin were the rabbis known as Pharisees, or Pirushim. God gave permanent authority to these judges to interpret the law and God's word, and it is a commandment to follow their decisions without turning even slightly to the right or the left. But the false prophet would challenge the authority of the Sanhedrin, thus revealing himself to be an evil man. The man known today as Jesus fulfilled all these prophecies. He became a king over the Christian church who changed the original law, doing away with the Hebrew calendar and the biblical holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, the Festival of Tabernacles, Passover, etc. He disregarded the one infinite God of the Hebrew Bible in favor of a new Trinity that included himself, and he repeatedly broke the law by committing terrible sins while openly challenging the God-given authority of the rabbis of the Sanhedrin.
See, God is taking the Jews out of Egypt. All the gods, all the polytheistic gods, all of them, the Egyptians and the other ones, they are collapsing. They don't have any avail against him. So in order to find something to deal with the Jews, they try to bring in somebody that has the same God. So that was the belief, belief in that. And so they bought Balaam. We don't have any mention of any of the people of the Pentateuch in outside sources, in other writings or in archaeological findings. We don't have any of them, see? Not Abraham, not Isaac, not Moses. The only person that we have any kind of a mention of is Balaam. And that is very strange, because there is an inscription on a rock in Transjordan, in which there is an inscription written in ancient script, in a language which are, with all that the scholars doing it today, it is not completely understood, see? Not completely understood, because it's a mixture of, it's possibly some kind of a Proto-Semitic language, you see? A very ancient language, which later on the languages became more clear. But this is a very ancient language, and it is high poetry, see? It is a prophecy of Balaam ben Beor, the same person, prophecy of Balaam ben Beor, which is mostly curses, see, mostly curses. So he was. The stories. So we have now. None of it is connected with the biblical story. It seems that he was a professional. He was a professional curser.
These topics are not discussed much amongst rabbinic scholars publicly these days, and for good reason. But much of it is still preserved in versions such as the Codex of Munich, which contains part of the oldest known Hungarian translation of the Bible, known as the Bible of Hussites. And the Hebraicus 95 is the only surviving manuscript in the world that contains, apart from 2 missing leaves, the complete text of the Babylonian Talmud. The disdain towards Christ underlines much of Judaism still today, and the desire to worship false idols is evident among the 2 sinners apart from Christ. Titus would invade Jerusalem and take part in the destruction of the Second Temple, breaching the walls on the 17th of Tammuz, an event of fasting, to commemorate 5 calamities that befell the Jewish people on this day, including the smashing of the stone tablets on Mount Sinai by Moses, the Roman siege, and the burning of a Torah scroll by the Roman soldier Apostomus. But it was the worship of the god Dumuzid, or what would later become known Tammuz, in God's vision to Ezekiel, where the women weep for Tammuz, that led to these calamities in the first place. A stiff-necked people, as described in the Old Testament, who have wandered ever since their original exile, clinging to their old gods, professing their conversion, while passing on the oral law through any means necessary. As for Onkelos, the man who allegedly resurrected our 3 sinners for counsel, he would later author the Targum Onkelos. This is still considered a primary Aramaic translation of Torah, authored by a man who was believed to have spoken to a punished Christ. The Paris Disputation would be one of many throughout Europe, attempting to expose Judaism for its denial and opposition to Christ. The city of Sfat and its influence of ancient mysticism would play host to perhaps its most important figure yet, one who would take the practice of Kabbalah to new heights and even lower depths. That of the Arizal, Isaac Luria. His teachings of Kabbalah will affect events on a global stage, leaving lasting and sometimes disastrous results. Perhaps Sfat's most famous resident was Rabbi Isaac Luria, or the Arizal, or Ari, meaning the lion, who only lived in Sfat for a couple of years, but this would be the time in which much of his work would be passed on. Even though only a few of Luria's writings exist, his teachings were passed on, likely through collected lecture notes and secretive oral tradition. Luriatic Kabbalah contains complex ideas about the creation of existence, its degeneration, and ultimate reparation. Luria taught of the 10 Sephirot, or vessels of divine light, Because of this imperfect creation, some of these vessels were broken, allowing sin and evil to enter into existence. His work would become considered essential to understanding the Zohar. His lectures were compiled by Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was most famous for the 8th volume, Etz Chaim, or Tree of Life. Luria and his followers had originally pledged to keep these writings secret and to never allow a foreign country outside of Palestine, where they were living at the time, to obtain a copy. But with the age of the printing press in full swing, and later the death of Isaac Luria in Sfat, the Arizal would see an explosion throughout Europe and would ultimately go on to create a proactive Zionist movement. But even Luria's work was based on Egyptian mysticism. Luria himself studied under Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi in Cairo, where he lived as a child, raised by a rich uncle, Mordecai Francis, a tax collector. He had been given the finest instruction money could buy. The 10 Sephirot are similar to the 10 gods of the Egyptian pantheon. This was the pantheon of gods that Jacob would have encountered when migrating to Egypt. Luria uses myth to explain that this pantheon would fail and the new 10 Sephirot would arise. He describes the fall of ancient Egyptian religion, referring to Exodus chapter 9 verse 25, describing the trees of the field being shattered. In the story of Passover, we read of 10 plagues being brought unto Egypt. According to Luria, this was a destruction of the pantheon, including Horus. The Lurianic Kabbalah, combined with the power of print, would take Kabbalah to new heights of popularity. For the first time, Jews from around the world gained access to this occult literature. But Lurianic Kabbalah requires its adherents to help set the stage for the coming of the Messiah by behaving in a proactive manner, often by acts of both good and evil. This new form of European Kabbalah is still the most widely distributed system today. Luria's system will also put emphasis on letters and numbers as forces of reality. These ideas are expressed somewhat through Jewish folklore, such as the anthropomorphic creature in the tales of the Golem. The letters of the Hebrew alphabet is a virtual list of words, all containing their own power, as well as providing the content. The Sephirot can be likened to the tone or inflection that gives added meaning. These letters are also numbers, giving an even deeper context to what is communicated. Every word has a numerical value. By using these values and comparing them to other words of the same value, a more complete picture can be understood by the ear of an understanding recipient. This would come into play on the 18th day of the 6th month of the year, 1666, when Lurianic Kabbalist Sabbatai Tzvi would declare himself Messiah. By the 17th century, he had amassed more than 1 million followers, and mystical Judaism would flourish above and below ground. The concepts of Sabbataianism, later Frankism, and Zionism will affect not only Europe, but the rest of the world in devastating fashion. Our struggle of good and evil is as old as the tales we tell. The story of Erev Rav is a crucial link between ancient evil, modern times, and the end of days. Knowing the motivation of this evil helps us understand the direction of our timeline. According to many Jewish mystics, the Erev Rav will spawned in the 130 years that Adam, the first man, was in excommunication for his sin. He would father Rukin, Shidin, and Lilin, considered to be demons or evil spirits. Like Adam's 130-year exile, Moses would be born to Yocheved at the age of 130 years, same number of years as Jacob's travel. Luria, also known as Arizal, explains that there is a significance in this number, atoning for Adam, which is the reason for the story. In Numbers chapter 7, at the tabernacle, which was partly to atone for the golden calf. Understanding the story of the Erev Rav and their influence is essential to understanding where we are today. While there are many views regarding the Erev Rav and their origins, we do know that they were the mystics, many of whom were likely sent out by Pharaoh to instigate and be like a yoke upon the neck of Israel, a people who would have been destroyed had Moses not argued on their behalf, hoping for their conversion, a people who God commanded for Saul to destroy completely, only for Saul to disobey, a people that will have God's wrath for generations, as it is written in Exodus chapter 17, verse 16, regarding the Amalekites. In many ways, the Erev Rav is the tree of life, represented by the knowledge and practice of both good and evil, a knowledge that would lead to the fall of man and the introduction of darkness that would infest mankind until the end. But the Jewish mystic views the Erev Rav slightly different than the Gentile. While many Christians believe that the Antichrist will appear during the end times, Jews believe in a future coming of a Messiah, or Moshiach, and that the Erev Rav will be those who fight against him. Erev Rav is Adam, Cain, Ishmael, Edom, the branches of Balaam, and much of the lurking evil we see today, some by actual blood. They are the reason for the destruction of the great flood of Noah. They are the convert, the Pharisee, the Kabbalist, the mystic, the magician, the moneylender, and their desire to arouse good and evil to a climax, resulting in the coming of Mashiach, or Antichrist, is inevitable.
Look, the Jews are ready to accept the Antichrist as their Messiah. And yet Christians are being taught that in the end times, all of the Jews are going to believe on Jesus Christ. Well, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what the devil's doing here. When the Jews accept the Antichrist as their Messiah, then all of the apostate Christians are going to point to that and say, look, this is the second coming of Jesus Christ. Look, all the Jews believe on him. What is the devil's goal with the Antichrist? To get people to believe that he is the second coming of Jesus Christ.
They are the apostate minister, the moguls of media and politics, for it is within the law that they reside and exert their will. The goal of the Erev Rav is to unite with Edom and Ishmael, an unholy trinity. The Erev Rav serves as a perpetual thorn in the side of Israel, while at the same time claiming to be the victim of persecution, a stiff-necked people, rebranding and renaming their gods, and disguising their oral traditions in code, and making their homes in the most logical of places by taking up residence in the faith of others, a mixed multitude. And as we will see in later episodes, the army of the snake is all around us. The signs and logos are everywhere for those willing to see. A great deception is upon us, and understanding these signs could be the difference between awaiting the arrival of Moshiach or the Antichrist.
certainly very little attention has been brought to it in the public school curricula, and there's absolutely no excuse for that. It was the worst thing that happened in the 20th century. And that's really saying something, because the 20th century was about as bad as it gets. And so, and the fact that these deaths on massive scale occurred, and the fact that we don't know that deep inside our bones is a testament to the absolute rot of the education system.
Tim rushed in my office and said, Ben, it's arrived, come and look. And I went in his office and I saw this sexy black cube, and he was just setting it up. And it was the easiest machine to set up that I'd ever seen.
Absolutely reprehensible is the fact that this is not widespread knowledge among students in the West, any of this, and it's because your education, your historical education, if you started to describe it as appalling, you would barely scratch the surface. These were the most important events of the 20th century, and they're barely covered at all in standard historical curriculum.